We are in Torah Yutet in Likutey Moharan, and we're up to Seif Dalid. So we're in Torah 19, part 4 of this Torah called Tfilah Lechabakuk, where Rebbe Nachman is explaining to us how a person can lift up and purify their physical self to such a degree, to such an extent that their personal tzaddik will shine through and influence the whole world to return to Hashem. That is the goal. That's the ideal, the greatest level that we're seeking here. And Rabbi Nachman explains to us that the tzaddikim of the generation have merited this already. And the greatest way that we can receive from this light, we can receive from this aspect that Rabbi Nachman calls the mirror, right, is when we hear Torah, when we learn Torah from the tzaddikim of the generation, while we are in person receiving the Torah from these tzaddikim, we go, we visit them, and we gaze upon their holy face, and we hear the Torah directly from them. That in that way we merit. The tzaddik's face is like a mirror because he has purified himself to such an extent, to such a degree, that it's like a mirror. It's completely clear. And when we look at the tzaddik and we hear Torah from the tzaddik, we are inherently motivated and guided to, first of all, recognize those aspects within us that need to be fixed and rectified, and also to actually go through the process that is needed to fix them, to fix those aspects, and to return to Hashem, to return to our perfect self, our perfect state. And so Rabbi Nachman is teaching us in this Torah the process of how we can accomplish this as well, because each one of us needs to recognize that we have the potential of being the tzaddik of the generation, and each one of us has within ourselves, we each have a spark of tzaddik, a spark of tzaddik that is unique, that no one else in the generation has. And we want to bring that spark of tzaddik to be revealed and to influence the whole world with its light, so that the whole world becomes a better place and everyone in the world increases their connection and their relationship to Hashem, the quality of that relationship in a greater way, in that unique way that you can teach the world to live by. And so Rabbi Nachman outlines this process by teaching us about the brit, by teaching us about the brit. The brit is the connection to Hashem. The brit is the aspect of Yesod, which is the sphere that connects the upper 8 sphirot with the malchut. The upper 8 sphirot are all connected to the malchut through the Yesod. And so the Yesod is the connector. It's what connects, it's the channel that connects the godliness, the liveliness, the infinite liveliness and love of Hashem to the places of darkness, to the places of physicality, relatively speaking. So every world has its malchut. And what brings the light of Hashem to the malchut aspect of that world is the Yesod, and that's the brit, and that's the aspect of tzaddik. And Rabbi Nachman explains to us that this is the way that we connect to this light is through by keeping the 2 pillars, by strengthening the 2 pillars of this Yesod. And the 2 pillars are the holy language, perfecting the holy language, and at the same time keeping our sexuality pure and holy. And so Rabbi Nachman teaches us about how the holy language is the way that Hashem created the world and the way that Hashem creates the world. And it is containing within it all of the belief system of holiness, the attitudes of holiness, the way of living of holiness is all contained. That consciousness of holiness, the holy consciousness, is all contained in the language of holiness, in the holy language. Whereas you also have on the other side the 70 nations of idol worshippers. Each one of them has their own language, and there are 70 languages. And each one of those 70 languages contains within it the impurities of that nation, with all of their corrupt belief systems and their corrupt attitudes and behaviors and ways of living. All of that evil inclination, that physical, that lower self, okay, that animalistic urge of that nation is within their language. So the negativity of that consciousness is within the language of that nation. And then Rabbi Nachman tells us how there is a certain negativity that includes, that contains within it the negativity and the concealment and the darkness of all the 70 nations is one. And that's the burning furnace of desire, lust for immoral, illicit sexual behavior. And so the rectification of that, says Rabbi Nachman, is through perfecting the holy language. When we perfect the holy language, we merit to dissolve and extinguish the burning furnace of lust for immoral, illicit sexual behavior. And that's what Rabbi Nachman teaches us in this Torah, that these two pillars, these two foundations of the Yesod, are, one is dependent on the other. To the extent and the degree that we have rectified and purified and completed and perfected the holy language, that's the extent and the degree that we will merit holy sexuality. And the extent and the degree that we have merited this tikkun brit, holy sexuality, that's the extent and the degree that we will merit to speak the holy language in a holy way. And so Rabbi Nachman then teaches us about the Targum. The Targum is the klipa that is in between the side of holiness and the side of unholiness, the side of kedusha and tuma. And this klipa is represents the tree of good, of knowledge of good and evil. It's a neutral state that contains good and evil together in a mixture. And it is the place through which the 70 languages try to ascend and steal from the holy language. They try to break away sparks from the holy language and steal them away. And there's a language that is represented by this midpoint, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that's the language of Targum, which is Aramaic. And what they seek to do, the side of the klipa, they seek to do the side of concealment. They seek to take from this language that contains good and bad, and they seek to use it for bad. And when they use this language for bad, for evil, they speak the language of Targum, the neutral language, in a negative way. Okay, and then what that causes is for the sparks of holiness contained within that language, mixed in that language, to fall down into the place of klipa. And then what that means is that the klipa is now able to steal even more from the side of holiness. And so this is what Rabbi Nachman explained, the three women that Shlomo HaMelech speaks about, the Isha Chachama, the wise woman, or the woman of valor, in the side of holiness. And then you have the Eshet Ksilut, the woman of foolishness, on the side of Tuma, the side of Klipa. And then you have the Isha Maskelet, the woman of intellect, in the middle. And she's either a woman of intellect or a woman of destruction. Maskelet or Mishakelet. It's the same word, the same letters, just a different pronunciation. And the woman of foolishness, which represents the primordial serpent, persuades the woman of valor persuades her to fall to sin, right? To fall to the side of evil through the woman in the middle, the intermediary, the woman of intellect. And that woman of intellect is used as intellect of destruction. Okay, this is kind of like what we spoke about in previous Torah, represented in the pasuk of Chachamim hema lehara ulheitiv lo yadau. Right? They are wise for evil. Their wisdom is channeled in evil, and they don't know how to do good. That means their consciousness does not know how to do good. They have used their consciousness only for knowing bad and for creating bad, for creating destruction. And that's where the woman of intellect, when that intellect is used for destruction, so then the good sparks within it are swallowed by the klipa, by the woman of foolishness, and that causes the persuasion by the woman of valor. This is what we see by the Eitz Hadat Tov Hara, when the primordial serpent injected his venom in Chava. Okay, that was through what? Through the tree of knowledge of good and evil, through the Targum. And so we want to do just the opposite. The way that we rectify this is that we take the Targum, we take the tree of good and bad, knowledge of good and bad, we take this midpoint, and we separate the sparks of holiness from within it, and we return those sparks of holiness to the side of kedusha, to the side of holiness. And by doing so, we are empowering and rectifying and perfecting the woman of valor. And now when she is healed and perfected and completed, so she is no longer vulnerable to the woman of foolishness. Now she is in a state of such perfection that the woman of foolishness would never dare, she can't even exist in the face of the light that is emanating from the face of the woman of valor. Okay? And so that's what it means. That's what our intention is. It's to use the world, first of all, making sure that we don't do any sin. We don't eat anything that's not kosher. We don't enjoy anything of this world in a way that is not in alignment with the Torah and mitzvot. But at the same time, there's so many things that we are permitted to enjoy, right? When the food is kosher, why not? You can have a 10-course meal, okay, with the most exquisite, amazing, delicious chef-cooked meal from, with wine and all that, and everything is kosher, and you made a bracha, etc., etc., right? So everything in this world can be enjoyed within the boundaries of the Torah. A person can live their life just enjoying all the things in this world, and then a person is within the space, this neutral space, okay? Because in the things of this world, you have the physicality of it, which is negative. It's not absolute. You're not connecting directly to the divine when you're eating a hamburger, a kosher hamburger, as if you were sitting and learning Torah. You're not connecting to Hashem in the same way. Okay, so these things have a negative aspect to them. And at the same time, there is a positive aspect. There are sparks of holiness within that hamburger that will give you energy to serve Hashem better. And so when you eat that hamburger when you're eating that burger, right? Let's call it a burger, just so no one gets confused. When you're eating that burger with the right intentions, and you're eating it, the bracha that you make before and the bracha that you make after, with the right connection to Hashem, that's that connection from the heart. And when you're eating at the table, you're not only eating with the right intention so that you have more energy to serve Hashem better, you're also, while you're eating, you're focused on experiencing with awareness that what that taste is that you're experiencing, the taste of the food that gives you the energy. Those sparks, that's the sparks of holiness. It's really godliness within the food that's giving you the energy. It's not the physicality of it that's giving you the energy. We all know what happens to the physical part of the food after a couple of hours, okay? And so that combined with also learning Torah at the table, which is a tremendously powerful way of lifting up the sparks of holiness from the food, from the whole meal. And then a person will separate and lift up, bring up all of the sparks of holiness within the meal, within the food, within the physicality, within the place called nogah, and that will cause a completion, a perfection to the holy language. Okay, and this is very similar to a previous Torah that we spoke about, bringing the mizbeach, completing the altar when you eat in a holy way. Okay, I just gave you this example now. There are many examples I could have used where a person is enjoying the things that are permitted according to the Torah, the things of this world which are permitted according to the Torah, but he's enjoying it in a holy way. I could have used many examples, but I used the eating at the table, your meal, as an example, because this just adds deeper understanding and clarity when we are reminded of that previous Torah that speaks exactly of this example. And so when you do that, you are completing the holy language. Those sparks of holiness are lifted up and they perfect the chava, they perfect the shechina, they bring the shechina to a greater state of perfection. And that's called perfecting the holy language. And that's our purpose in everything that we do into this world, to such a point where the Baal Shem Tov taught, and Rabbi Nachman speaks about it, how if a holy person eats his meals in this way that we described, that we outlined, there are some holy people, holy tzaddikim, that eat their meals with in such a connected way to Hashem, right? In the way that we just described, that the service of Hashem, the way that they serve Hashem when they are eating their food, when they are eating their meal, is much greater. And the connection that they achieve when they're eating their meal is even much greater than the connection and the service of Hashem that other people on a lower level achieve when they are learning Torah, even, or when they're davening, when they're praying to Hashem. Okay, so it's all about, and obviously that tzaddik that we're speaking about, that his eating, when he eats, is on such a lofty level, and his connection is so great and so authentic, and his service of Hashem is tremendous when he's eating, much more than the learning Torah of someone else. Obviously, the tzaddik on such a level, his Torah is 1,000 times greater than that, right? But the point is that the eating of a tzaddik in this way that we outlined is tremendous, tremendous service of Hashem. That's the point in this. And so Rabbi Nachman, let's continue inside a little bit and see how Rabbi Nachman explains to us how the language of holiness, perfecting the language of holiness, Shlemut Lashon HaKodesh, causes the 70 languages to be dissolved, extinguished, canceled out. The impurities of those 70 nations are dissolved and extinguished and canceled out when we perfect the holy language. How does that happen? Because that's what Rabbi Nachman was explaining to us. So let's see a little bit inside. Ve'ikar binyana. No, here. וזהו, vayapel Hashem Elokim Tardemah, מספר תרגום כמובן. כי על ידי התרגום עיקר בעניינה של לשון הקודש. And therefore it says in the pasuk, it says Hashem caused that man should fall into a deep sleep. מספר תרגום, that has the numerical value of תרגום. כי על ידי התרגום עיקר בעניינה של לשון הקודש. ועל ידי שמעלין את הטוב שבתרגום ללשון הקודש ומפילים הרע שבו נופלים כל השבים לשון מבחינת לשון נופל הלשון. And so last time we spoke about how a person has the awake state of consciousness, complete consciousness, and that's when a person is the most alive. And then there's a person that is dead on the other side of the spectrum, like actually dead. And then the person's consciousness in the body is the most removed, right? So the consciousness of a person doesn't die, but the consciousness in the body is not there. The body is lacking that consciousness in the greatest way. And then you have the intermediate stage between complete consciousness in the body and complete absolute non-consciousness in the body. And that's when a person is asleep. So when a person is asleep, there is some consciousness that's left there in the body while the person is sleeping, that is much greater than if a person were not alive, and it's much less than if a person were completely awake. So it's kind of like in the middle, and that's called Tardemah, when a person is asleep. And Tardemah has the same numerical value as Targum, which represents, it implies to us, as Rabbi Nachman is saying, it implies that this sleep of a person is a state that represents the nogah, the neutral, the intermediate state, the place of mixture of good and bad. When a person sleeps and he has dreams, the dreams contain good, contain truth within them, and they also contain a lot of untruth. And depending on the level, the spiritual level and clarity and purity of that person and holiness of that person, that's the degree to which the good within the dream will be revealed, and the sheker, the confusion, the chaos, the doubt in the dream will be less pronounced, or will fall away, will not even a person will not even be aware of it. Okay. And so in this Targum, so it says that Hashem caused man to fall into a deep sleep when creating Chava, when creating the language, the holy language. And so that suggests that the way that you create the holy language, you perfect the holy language, right? Because Chava was already in existence, but perfecting her, completing the back of Chava into it, making her, creating her as an individual body, as an individual self, Okay, that happens through Tardemah, through the perfection, rectification, the tikkun of nogah, this intermediate state. Okay, that's what Rabbi Nachman is teaching us here. When you elevate the good in the Targum language, okay, and you use the Targum language, you use your regular speech, your regular language, in order to speak positive, in order to speak words of Torah, okay, in order you infuse your speech with godliness, with godly consciousness, okay, with a connection to Hashem, and at the same time you vanquish and lower and cancel out any negative uses of your speech. In this way, you are causing the 70 languages to fall down. Why are you causing the 70 languages to fall down? You're not even speaking the 70 languages, you're speaking Targum, but you're causing the 70 languages to fall down because now in this mid state, the place where they usually suck their sustenance, the sparks of holiness, you have separated those sparks of holiness and lifted them up to the side, to the woman of valor. And so now those 70 languages are left without any life energy. And so that's why you've caused all the 70 languages to fall down, to be extinguished. Okay? And so this is what Rebbe Nachman calls Noflin kol hashivim lashon b'bchinat lashon nofel al lashon. This is something he mentioned earlier. Okay, this is the represented in the pasuk of one tongue, one language falling in place of another. So the 70 languages are now falling as the holy language is being lifted up. V'zeu vayapel notrikun pe lahem v'lo yidaberu כעל ידי בחינת תרדמה שהוא בחינת לשון תרגום, שעל ידי זה עיקר בעניינה של חווה שהוא בחינת לשון הקודש, על ידי שמעלין הטוב שבו מפילין הרע שבו כנ"ל, על ידי זה נופלים כל השבעים לשון מבחינת פה להם ולא ידברו, ראשי תיבות ויפל כנ"ל. And this is, Rabbi Nachman now takes one word from this pasuk that we began, the pasuk that says that Hashem caused Adam, he caused him to fall into a deep sleep. And so that falling, the word Hashem caused him to fall, the word for that in the Torah is vayapel. Vayapel. He caused to fall. And that's the literal translation of the word. So it says Rabbi Nachman, that word vayapel is Rashi Tevot, it's an acronym for the pasuk. It's actually a pasuk that says Pe lahem v'lo yidaberu. Pe lahem v'lo yidaberu, which is in Tehillim. And this pasuk, what does it mean? It means they have a mouth, but they cannot speak. That's the literal translation of that pasuk. Pe lahem v'lo yidaberu is the acronym. It begins with the letters that spell out vayapel, and it caused to fall. So this implies, says Rabbi Nachman, כי על ידי בחינת תרדמה שהוא בחינת לשון תרגום, שעל ידי זה עיקר בעניינה של חווה, שהוא בחינת לשון הקודש, על ידי שמעלין הטוב שבו, מפילין הרע שבו, על ידי זה נופלים כל השבעים לשון מבחינת פה להם ולא ידברו, ראשי תיבות ויפל. And so what he's saying is that when we, through this sleep state, through the intermediate state of consciousness, which is called sleep, which is representing also the intermediate language called Targum, that through that state, through that place, through that language, we complete and perfect and build up the holy language by selecting the sparks of holiness and returning them to the source. Okay, that's how we build Chava, like Hashem created Chava, built Chava, completed the individual body of Chava through the state of sleep, right? What happens through all of this? Lifting up the sparks, bringing them back to the side of holiness, reconnecting them. So you're eating your burger, and the sparks of holiness within the burger, the sparks of energy, which we're saying is all godliness, you are, with your intention, with your awareness and your consciousness, connecting it to Hashem. And so you're connecting that up to Hashem. When you're speaking your speech, even though you're not speaking the holy language, you're speaking another language, but you're speaking it in a holy way, Okay, so what you're doing is that you're taking the sparks of holiness in that language, and with your awareness and with the way you're using it, the language, the way you're speaking and expressing yourself, you're connecting the sparks of holiness to this, to kedusha, to the woman of valor, to perfect the woman of valor, to perfect chava, to complete the holy language. And in this way, what that causes is for the 70 languages to fall down, to fall away. And that's what we are saying here. They have a mouth, but they cannot speak, because through the perfection, the completion, the rectification of the holy speech, of the holy language, now the other 70 languages, they may have a mouth, but they can't speak. Their language is void, is emptied out of any energy, of any life, of any sustenance, of any power, of any effectiveness. Remember, we spoke about how the perfected holy speech, someone that has infused their speech with the fear and awe of Hashem, which we say is one of the characteristics of the woman of valor. Okay, and so that's the perfected speech. Yirat Hashem, someone who's a Yirat Hashem, his words are the most effective and the most influential in the world. When he speaks, his words are heard and accepted. They are words that we say about them, words that emanate from the heart, penetrate the heart. And so they are words that penetrate the hearts of everyone who hears them. And so they are the most effective, the most heard words in the world are those words that come from the state of awe of Hashem, from the state of perfected Lashon HaKodesh. The holy language has been brought to its highest state of completion, of perfection. Whereas what happens is, when you do that, and how do you do that? You do that through the intermediate state of sleep, the intermediate state of using the language of Targum in a holy way, all of these aspects that represent the intermediate state. When you're selecting the good from it and bringing it back, connecting it to Hashem, you are completing the holy language. And when that happens, so the 70 languages, they have fallen. What does it mean they have fallen? They have a mouth, but they cannot speak. So their speak is void of any power, not effective. They're not heard. They may be speaking, but it's like the chirping of a bird and has no power to it. It has no good in it. Okay, no energy in it, no sustenance to it. ויוסף על ידי שהיה לו שלמות לשון הקודש, על ידי זה היה יכול לפשר חלמין, כי עיקר החלום הוא בשינה, היינו בתרדמה, ושלמות לשון הקודש הוא על ידי תרדמה, שהוא בחינת תרגום כנ"ל. וכן יוסף שזכה לשלמות לשון הקודש, שעיקר שלמותו על ידי תרדמה כנ"ל, הכן היה יודע לפשר חלמין שבתרדמה. So now says Rebbe Nachman, and this is getting to the next stage of understanding this process that he's outlining for us. Yosef a tzaddik, as we spoke about earlier, merited the complete perfection of the holy language. When finally he reveals to his brothers after so many years that he is Yosef, he says, Kipia medaber alechem, right? And he shows them that he is speaking the holy language, that no one else knew that language. Paro didn't know that language. Paro spoke all the 70 languages, but he didn't know the holy language, the Lashon HaKodesh. And Yosef is speaking to them in this holy language, and this was a sign of his sexual holiness as well, okay, of the tikkun and brit of Yosef. And so because Yosef is the epitome of the perfection of Yesod, the epitome of that holy language in the highest, greatest state of perfection. Therefore, what that means is that for Yosef, in Yosef's reality, in Yosef's universe, in Yosef's world, from his perspective, that intermediate place of Tardemah, that place where there is a mixture of good and bad, was no mixture at all. Yosef had completely clarified, purified, lifted, and elevated the sparks of holiness within that place of mixture. Okay, for Yosef is completely on, for him, in his reality, in his universe, he has completely rectified the sin of the Itzadat Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For him, he has completely separated the good from the bad and brought it back to the side of holiness. And therefore, for him, he can take any dream and interpret the dream perfectly. For him, it's not some weird thing that somebody dreamt of, because he sees directly in that dream is a mixture, as we said. The dream is from the dream state, which is the sleep state, which is a mixture of good and bad, because it's not completely clear and it's not completely unclear. There's a mixture of clarity and doubt in that state of dreaming and that state of sleep. But Yosef, because he has rectified, perfected the holy language, for him, he sees the clarity in that situation. He sees the truth in the dream. His eyes are able to pick up on all the points that are absolutely clear and true within the dream, within that story that is confusing. There's a lot of confusion there because of the true aspects and the untrue aspects mixed in together as a whole dream. But Yosef is able to see clearly beyond all of that confusion and pick up on the points of truth and clarity and know the clear interpretation of that dream, because all of the evil, all of the doubt, all of the confusion has fallen away for him, for Yosef, from that place of holy speech, of Lashon HaKodesh that Yosef merited. And that's why Yosef was able to interpret the dream so clearly and so perfectly, because Yosef merited the Lashon HaKodesh, the perfection of the holy language, which is perfected through the clarifying, cleaning up, selecting the truth from the untruth in that intermediate state, in that state of sleep, and that state of dreams. And so we'll see more about that in the next class, Yirat Hashem.